You are going to infect that wound, you dummies. The carefree nurse Ada was standing by the hallway, looking like she was chased by a lion on her way to the Jiwan Empire. She cited the tall, huge men doing a terrible job on the wound they claimed to be dressing. Please make way! The two tall, enormous guards stepped back, confused. Not because they were afraid. These were men who did not frighten easily, but because they could not decide which problem to address first. Who she was, how she had gotten there, or the fact that she had just called them dummies. They were still working that out when Ada swung into action. Hey, you, grab me the gloves. She pointed at guard number 2 without ceremony, then turned. And you, mister, please get me some antiseptic. Now everyone out. So my patient needs some privacy. The guards became uncomfortable in a way they were not used to being uncomfortable. A whole Ji-Wan. She had just referred to him as her patient. Ji-Wan had not been left alone with anyone in 5 years. Not a guest, not a doctor, not a friend. There was always someone in the room, always someone at the door. That was not a preference. That was a rule. They grumbled amongst themselves. Park straightened, which should not have been physically possible, given how straight he already was, and stepped forward, ready to explain the protocol, ready to restore the natural order of things. Ji-Wan raised his hand. One hand, one small, unhurried gesture. Everything is fine. You are dismissed. Park closed his mouth. The guards looked at each other one last time, then filed out, one by one. Lay 6 armed men walking out of the most secured room in the building because a nurse with mismatched earrings and a loose hem told them to. The door closed. Silence. Ada got to work. She dressed the wound carefully, methodically. Her hands were steady and gentle, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times and never once stopped caring about it. She cleaned the wound properly, layered the correct gauze, began the dressing with a precision that was almost peaceful to watch. Ji-Wan sat still. He had not had medical care like this in years. His personal family doctor was thorough and efficient, but cold in the particular way that clinical people sometimes became when they had seen too much for too long. That doctor was out of town this week, which was why the clinic had sent Ada, which was how she ended up here, which was how any of this was happening at all. Her hands were different. There was a softness in them that was not weakness, a steadiness that felt, somehow, like something he had not been offered in a very long time. He looked at the ceiling, then he looked back at her hands. Ada reached for the adhesive plaster, peeled it open, leaned slightly around him to smooth it carefully into place, and that was when her eyes caught them. His back. The scars. Numerous. Layered. Years of them mapped across his skin, each one a story she did not know and had not been invited into. She stared. And then, without thinking, without filtering, in the way that Ada had always spoken, the way that had gotten her into trouble and out of it in equal measure. Your scars are beautiful, she said it quietly, almost to herself. I grew up with my father having these kinds of scars. I used to be the one to treat them. She smoothed the final plaster into place. That was actually what influenced me to become a nurse. Ji-Wan said nothing. But that statement, that quiet, offhand, completely unguarded statement, landed somewhere deep. It was supposed to be a key to an important secret. Neither of them knew that yet. What Ji-Wan knew, in that moment, was simpler and more complicated at the same time. Every woman he had ever encountered had looked away from his back the first time they saw it, had shifted, made excuses, found somewhere else to be. Nobody spoke about the scars. Nobody touched them unless they had to. Nobody had touched his back, really touched it, in years. And here was this woman, saw in his room for less than 30 minutes, mismatched earrings, skirt falling apart at the back, telling him his scars were beautiful like it was the simplest thing in the world to say. Because for her, it was. Ada finished. She began packing her supplies back into her medical box, clicking things shut, completely unbothered. completely unaware of what those 12 words had just done to the man sitting in front of her. Jiwan watched her, and for the first time since she had walked through that door, he spoke. "What is your name?" "Ada." A beat. "Thank you." "Ada." Ada smiled, picked up her bag, walked out. "You're welcome!" Her voice carried all the way back down the corridor. Bright, unbothered, free. The broken wheel of her medical bag screeching against the marble all the way to the stairs. Then silence. Park stepped back into the room, resumed his position by the wall, looked at Ji-won. Ji-won was looking at the door, at the space where she had just been. "Shall I look into her, sir?" Ji-won looked at his freshly dressed arm. Clean, properly done. The best it had felt since the injury. Then he looked at the door. "Her name is Ada." A beat. "She'll be back." Park nodded, pulled out his notepad, wrote carefully, "ADA. She will be back." Ji-won looked at his arm one more time, and somewhere, in a place he had long since closed off, something moved. Just slightly, just enough. Ada had never been a 9-to-5 person. Never. She was the kind of woman who moved on her own time, her own terms, who had built her life around a freedom that most people only talked about. She had lived by it, sworn by it. And then the incident happened. We are not going to talk about that just yet. What can be said is this: it changed things. It changed her. And one morning, she woke up, looked at the four walls around her, and understood for the very first time in her life that she needed to get her ass out of the house, go to work, and make a living. So that is what she did. Every single day. Sunlight pushed through the curtains of her apartment. Ada stood at the mirror, checked both earrings this time, matched them, checked the hem of her skirt in the light, nodded at her reflection. Progress. The clinic was busy the way it always was. That particular smell? Antiseptic layered over something underneath it that never fully went away, no matter how many times the floors were cleaned. A man with a bandaged hand sat in the corner. A woman balanced a restless child on her lap. 2 minor accident cases waited by the front desk. Ada moved through all of it with the ease of someone who belonged here, checking charts, greeting patients, exchanging quick words with colleagues in passing. This was her element, and she wore it comfortably. Then her manager's voice cut across the room. "Ada!" Her manager was already walking toward her before Ada had fully turned around, clipboard in hand, talking at the pace of someone who had 17 other things to do after this. "Mr. Ji-won has requested your services again. He's offering 5 times today's rate. His driver will be here shortly. Get your kit together." She was already walking away before the last word had fully left her mouth. Ada stood there. You didn't even give me a chance to—" The manager was gone. Ada looked at her medical bag, looked at where her manager had just been, looked back at the bag. 5 times, she said quietly to herself. A beat. Okay. She was never going to say no. She knew that. Her manager knew that. The universe, at this point, probably knew that too. The car was smooth and quiet, the kind that made the outside world feel like it belonged to somebody else. Ada sat in the back, medical bag on her lap, watching the city change through the window as they moved from her part of town into his. She thought about the wound, how it was healing, what she would check first, whether those guards had touched the dressing. They had probably touched the dressing. The car stopped. Ada stepped out and walked through the entrance. The same marble, the same guards, the same heavy silence that seemed to have been installed alongside the furniture. Ada walked in like she had been here before, because she had. She moved through the hallway, and then she stopped. Just stopped. Mid-step, a scent. It hung in the air with the kind of quiet confidence that only certain things carried. Warm, particular. The slow curl of cigar smoke that was unlike any other. Not harsh, not cheap. Something rare and specific and familiar. Ada stood very still. Her face changed. Not dramatically, not in any way that anyone watching would have been able to fully name. Just a shift, subtle, like something underneath the surface had been reached, without warning, and without permission. Her eyes went soft. She was not in the hallway anymore. She was somewhere warmer, somewhere earlier in her life. A kitchen table, evening light. A man she loved sitting with his back to the window, the particular curl of smoke rising from between his fingers, the smell of it filling a room she had not stood in for a very long time. Her father. She felt it rise in her chest. That specific ache, the kind that did not announce itself, just arrived. She felt her eyes begin to sting, and she blinked once and pulled herself back. Miss Ada! She blinked again, came back fully. Park was standing at the foot of the stairs, straight-backed, formal. He offered a nod that served as both greeting and welcome simultaneously. "Thank you for coming." "You're welcome," she said, still gathering herself. Then, almost to herself, "That scent." "Ma'am?" Ada began walking toward the stairs. Park fell into step beside her. "That cigar," she said quietly. "The one I can smell in here." She paused for just a moment. "It reminded me of my dad. That was his favorite cigar." Park stopped walking. Ada took 2 more steps before she noticed. She turned. Park was not the one who had stopped. Jia Wan was standing at the top of the stairs. He had come down to meet her, and he had stopped completely, looking at her. His expression had not changed. It rarely did. But something behind his eyes had shifted. Something quick and alert and private. That was not a regular cigar. He knew that better than anyone in the room. It was rare. Specific. Imported through channels that did not appear on any legal document anywhere in the world. Only the people in his closest and most trusted circle had ever been near it. Which meant, "Who is your father?" His voice was careful, measured. The question beneath the question, sitting just underneath the surface of the words. Ada opened her mouth. "Boss." Park's voice came from the hallway entrance. His face said what his mouth had not yet fully formed. "They are here to see you." Jia Wan looked at Park, then at Ada. Something moved across his face. Brief, controlled, gone. "1 minute," he said to her. "Please." And he went. Ada stood on the stairs and watched him leave. He was expecting a shipment from Chicago. His people needed to be briefed. Tasks assigned. Every detail locked down and confirmed before anything moved. Nothing in Ji-won's operation was left to chance or assumption. So he went. And Ada waited. And by the time he came back, as these things so often went, neither of them could find the thread of where they had left off. The question floated away. Unanswered. For now. Ada set her medical bag on the table and opened it. "I brought you something." Ji-won watched as she reached in and produced a small tube. She held it up between them. "Keloid removal cream, for the scarring. It won't erase them, but it helps with the tension in the skin. Keeps them from pulling." Ji-won looked at the tube, then at her. Something in his face softened. Just slightly, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. "Thank you." Ada nodded, pulled on her gloves. "Right. Let's see how it's healing." She examined the wound, checked the dressing. It was healing well. She began the redress with the same careful hands as before, saw the same quiet focus, the same unhurried steadiness that seemed to bring the temperature of the room down simply by existing. When the wound was dressed, Ada stepped around behind him. "I want to check the surrounding area," she said. She picked up the tube. "May I?" A pause. Jia Wan gave the smallest nod. Ada opened the cream, warmed a small amount between her fingers, until it was no longer cold. And then she began. Her hands moved across his back slowly, deliberately, gentle in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with care. The real kind. The kind that did not calculate itself, or present itself, or ask for anything back. She worked across the oldest scars first, the ones that had long since settled deep into his skin and made themselves at home there. Then the newer ones, following each one carefully, the cream going on smooth and warm, her fingers never rushed, never careless. Ji Wan sat very still. But underneath that stillness, something was shifting. This was a man who had built entire walls around himself over decades, who had trained himself quietly and thoroughly out of needing, who had made peace years ago with the particular kind of loneliness that came with the life he had chosen. He had accepted it, filed it away, moved on. Her hands on his back were undoing something, not loudly, not dramatically. The way water found its way through stone, not by force, not by insistence, just by being there, consistently, gently, long enough. Ada finished the last scar. She began to lift her hands. And that was when it happened. Ji Wan's hand came up. It covered hers. Gently, but deliberately. The way a person did something they had not planned, but could not stop themselves from doing. He turned his head, looked at her, and when he spoke, his voice was lower than usual. Quieter. The kind of quiet that costs something to produce. Please. A beat. Don't stop. Ada went still. She looked at him, and for a moment, just a moment that belonged to neither of them, and both of them at once, two people who had each been carrying things they had never put down, looked at each other across a distance that was suddenly very small. Raw. Surprised. Neither of them fully understanding what was happening in the room. Both of them feeling it anyway, in the chest, in the hands, in the particular silence that had settled around them, like it had been waiting for exactly this. He had not chosen those words. That was the truest thing about them. Ji Wan Shi, who selected every word the way a surgeon selected an instrument, had said that without selecting it at all. It had simply come. From somewhere he had stopped visiting a long time ago. And Ada, who had never stayed anywhere she did not feel free, did not move her hands. Something had changed in Ji Wan Shi. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It did not announce itself the way most changes did. It simply settled over him, quietly, the way evening settled over a city, gradually, and then all at once. The men noticed first. A shipment detail that would have earned someone a very cold stare 2 weeks ago passed without comment. A scheduling error that Park had braced himself to report was met with nothing more than a slow nod and a quiet "fix it." The compound, which had always operated under a particular atmospheric pressure, felt different. Lighter. As if someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed for years. Nobody said anything about it. Nobody was going to be the one to say anything about it. But they all felt it. Jia Wan himself could not have named it if asked. He moved through his days the same way he always had. Meetings, calls, decisions, the quiet machinery of his operation turning as it always turned. But underneath all of it, something had been rearranged in a place he did not often look. It had been 2 days since Ada had come to dress the wound, which meant she would be coming tomorrow. He was sitting at his desk when he remembered this. He sat with it for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. He opened a new message. She typed, "Be ready for dinner when you come tomorrow." He looked at it. Deleted it. Typed again, slower this time. "Please, can you have dinner with me when you come tomorrow?" He read it twice. Then he sent it before he could delete it a second time. He set the phone down, looked at it, looked away, looked at it again. Park, standing by the door, observed all of this and wrote nothing in his notepad because he had decided firmly that this was not his department. Ada was on the sofa, legs tucked underneath her, a film on the television that she was half watching, half ignoring. A bowl of something warm balanced on her knee. Her phone lit up. She picked it up, read the message, set it down, picked it up again. She opened the voice note function and pressed record. "Dinner?" Her voice was loud, immediate, fully Ada. "With me? Okay. Yes, I'll be there." She pressed send. Then immediately fell sideways into the sofa cushion. On the other end, in the quiet of his study, Ji-won's phone buzzed. He picked it up, pressed play, listened to the whole thing. When it finished, he set the phone down, and the corner of his mouth moved. Just barely, just enough. Park, still by the door, saw it. Wrote in his notepad, corner of mouth. Moved. Again. Underlined it twice. Said nothing. The evening came smelling like roses. White roses along the center of the table. Candles. The good plates. A table set for two, and no agenda except the meal itself. Ada walked in and stopped in the doorway. "You did all this?" Ji-won held out a chair. She sat. They ate and talked with the ease of two people who had somehow, without planning it, become comfortable with each other. Ada was warm and free and funny in the way she always was. Ji-won listened in the way he always did, quietly, completely, like someone who had spent years in rooms full of noise and was only now hearing something worth listening to. He laughed once, low and brief, but real. Ada pointed at him immediately across the table. "There it is. I knew it was in there somewhere." He looked at her. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met." She considered this, picked up her spoon. "I'll take that," she said. "I think." After dinner, Ada opened her medical bag with the quiet efficiency of someone switching modes seamlessly. She examined the wound under the light, checked the edges, pressed gently around the site. "It's healed," she said, something almost reluctant in her voice. "Properly. You don't need daily dressing anymore." Ji-won looked at her. "Weekly check," she added, not looking up. "Just to be safe." He said nothing, but neither of them argued with the arrangement. The car stopped outside her building. Ada looked up at it. Then she turned to him. She did not say anything. She leaned across, and she kissed him. It was not tentative. It was not a question. It was the kind of kiss that came from somewhere deeper than the mind, warm and certain and unhurried. Ji-won did not object. His hand came up and found the side of her face, and they stayed there in the quiet of the car, in the quiet of the street, in the quiet of something neither of them had planned, and both of them had been moving toward without knowing it. When they finally pulled apart, Ada looked at him for a moment. "Good night." "Aunt Ji-won." "Good night, Ada." She got out, walked to her door, did not look back, which cost her something, but she managed it. He had not felt like this in years. He could not name exactly what it was, but it was there, warm and unfamiliar and solid in his chest, the way things felt when they were real. He was still feeling it when the car pulled into the compound, still feeling it when he stepped out, still feeling it when he walked through the front door. And then Park was there, standing in the hallway, straight-backed as always, formal as always. But something in his face was carefully arranged in the way faces were when they were holding something they had not yet been given permission to release. He was holding an envelope. "Sir," Park said, "I have been making some findings." As instructed. Ji-won looked at the envelope. "About Ada." He took it, opened it. Inside, a photograph, documents, names, dates. A history assembled with Park's characteristic thoroughness, every detail accounted for, nothing left to assumption. Ji-won read, "Ada Okonkwo, daughter of Emeka Okonkwo." His chest tightened. Emeka Okonkwo, who had once sat across a table from Ji-won in a room not unlike this one, who had been part of something that could not be undone, whose name carried a weight that Ji-won had spent years learning to carry quietly. A former associate, a strong past, the kind that did not stay in the past, no matter how hard you pushed it there. Ji-won stood in the hallway for a long time. The warmth was still there in his chest, but now something cold was sitting beside it. Something complicated. Something that was going to require very careful thought. Park stood nearby, said nothing. Even Park, who took everything literally and felt most comfortable inside clear instructions, understood that this was a moment that did not yet have words. Ji-won closed the envelope. Say nothing, he said quietly. To anyone. Yes, sir. Jiawan walked down the hallway, the photograph inside the envelope, Ada's face looking back at him from the paper, and underneath it, her father's name. A name Jiawan she had hoped, for a very long time, never to hear again. He did not call. That was the first thing. The morning after the car, after the street, after everything, Jiawan sat in his study with the envelope on the desk in front of him and made a decision, not loudly, not dramatically, the way he made most decisions, quietly, completely, with the full weight of a man who understood that some things, once started, could not be easily stopped. He would create distance. It was the only logical thing to do until he understood what he was dealing with, until he knew how deep this went, until he had thought it through properly and carefully, and without the warmth of her presence making his thinking unreliable. So he did not call. He sent a message instead, something brief and reasonable, a scheduling conflict. He was sorry, they would rearrange. Ada replied with a simple, "No problem, let me know." He read it 3 times, put the phone face down on the desk, and got back to work. The first day, Ada did not think much of it. The second day, she noticed but told herself not to notice. The third day, she called the clinic and picked up an extra shift because staying home gave her too much room to think about things she had decided she was not thinking about. The fourth day, she reorganized her entire kitchen. The fifth day, she was sitting on the sofa, doing nothing in particular, when her eyes moved, casually, without intention, across the room, and landed on the flower, the one he had sent. It sat in a small vase on the windowsill, where she had put it the evening it arrived, the petals still holding, the stem still straight. She looked at it for a moment. Then she reached over and picked up the small card that leaned against the vase. She read it. And then the flashbacks came without asking permission. The dinner, the candles, the way he had laughed, low and brief and real. The drive home, the quiet street, the way his hand had come up and found the side of her face like it already knew where it was going. She sat with all of it, turned it over slowly, and then the question arrived, the one she had been keeping just far enough away to ignore. What had gone wrong? She sat with the card in her hand and genuinely could not find an answer. Not one that made sense. Not one that accounted for the shift from that night to these 5 days of carefully worded excuses delivered from a careful distance. She picked up her phone, called him, it rang, and went to voicemail. She called again, same. She typed a message, short and direct, watched the 3 dots appear on the other end, and then disappear without a reply ever coming. Ada set the phone down on the cushion beside her, sat very still for exactly 30 seconds. Then she stood up and walked to her bedroom. She was already at the gate by the time the car had fully stopped. "Miss Ada!" "Ji-Wan!" She said his name at a volume that was not a question and not a greeting. It was a declaration. She was here. She was coming in. These were simply the facts of the situation. The guards at the gate moved to intercept. "Ma'am, you cannot just—" "Ji-Wan!" She went around the first guard with the confidence of someone who had been here before and intended to be here again. The second guard stepped directly into her path. She stopped, looked at him, looked at the house, looked back at him. "Move," she said. "Please." Something in her voice, not angry, not aggressive, just completely and utterly certain, made him step aside without fully deciding to. She was already through the gate. Ada moved through the compound with purpose, through the main hallway, past the guards who stopped talking when they saw her, up the stairs, down the corridor. She knew where he would be. Inside the room, Ji-Wan heard her before he saw her. Her voice carrying down the corridor, his name in it, and underneath his name, something that landed in his chest and would not leave. He stood, crossed the room, reached for the door handle. Ada reached for it from the other side at the exact same moment. The door swung open. Ada's momentum carried her forward, and she tripped, fully, completely, with no graceful way to recover, straight into the room. Jia Wan caught her, both arms, firm, immediate. Her hands gripped his forearms, and his hands found her waist. And for a moment, they were simply two people suspended in the aftermath of almost falling, breathing slightly faster than usual, closer than they had been since the car on the quiet street 5 nights ago. Ada looked up at him. He looked down at her. And whatever Ada had come here to say, whatever speech she had assembled on the drive over, whatever questions she had lined up, whatever anger had carried her through that gate and up those stairs, left her completely. And whatever distance Ji-won had constructed so carefully over 5 deliberate days collapsed without making a sound. There was a long moment where neither of them moved, and then neither of them was thinking about any of it anymore. Ji-won reached back. The door closed. The corridor outside went quiet. The room was still afterwards, the kind of stillness that came after something significant, warm and heavy and unhurried. Late afternoon light coming through the curtains in long, soft lines across the floor. Ada lay looking at the ceiling. Ji-won lay beside her. Quiet, but a different kind of quiet from the one she had first encountered in this room. This one had no walls in it. She turned her head and looked at him. He was already looking at her. "You ignored my calls," she said. "I know. And my messages." "I know." She held his gaze. "Are you going to tell me why?" Ji-won looked at the ceiling. A long moment passed. "Not yet," he said. Ada considered this, looked back at the ceiling herself. "Okay," she said quietly. But Ji-won. "Yes!" "Don't do it again." He said nothing. But he reached across, and his hand found hers on top of the covers. And he held it. And that, for now, was enough. The morning came in gently. Soft light through the curtains. The kind of early quiet that belonged only to the hours before the world remembered itself. The room was warm, unhurried. Ada asleep on her side, hair loose across the pillow. Ji-won beside her, one arm resting behind his head, eyes open, not restless, just awake in the way of a man who had not slept this well in years and was quietly aware of it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the ceiling. And for the first time in a very long time, the ceiling had nothing heavy in it. What he did not know, what neither of them knew, lying there in that warm, unhurried quiet, was that the morning had already made its plans. That somewhere beyond the compound walls, engines were running and weapons were being checked, and a decision had been made that would arrive at this address before the coffee finished brewing. The calm had an expiry time. Neither of them knew it yet. Ada padded into the kitchen, wearing an oversized shirt she had pulled from Ji-won's cupboard, sleeves falling past her wrists, hem at her thighs. She had found the coffee maker after opening 3 wrong cupboards and had decided this was a reasonable victory. She hummed to herself while she waited for it to brew, leaned against the counter, looked out the window at the compound grounds in the morning light. She reached for a mug, and then the world came apart. The first bullet tore through the far wall with a sound that was nothing like the movies. Sharp, immediate, physical. Then more shots. Then boots on marble, doors swinging open, commands in clipped urgent Korean bouncing off the high ceilings. The compound, peaceful 30 seconds ago, became something else entirely. Ada dropped behind the kitchen counter. The coffee maker finished brewing. Outside, armed men moved fast across the compound grounds, the attackers pushing forward in tight formation, Ji-won's men meeting them at every point. It was brief, and it was brutal, and it was over faster than it started. Ji-won was out of the bedroom and moving before the second shot finished echoing. Ada was low behind the counter, back against the cabinet, knees to her chest, her breathing steady, not because she was not afraid, but because Ada had grown up in a house where you learned early to keep your breathing steady when things went wrong. Then the kitchen side door swung open. One of the attackers came through it low and fast, weapon raised, sweeping the room. He stopped. Ada looked up. They looked at each other across the kitchen. The man went completely still. He was broad-shouldered, mid-40s, a scar running from his left ear to his jaw that had long since settled into his face like it belonged there. His weapon was raised. His eyes were sharp and trained. And then they were something else entirely. He knew her. Not vaguely. Not as a passing resemblance. He knew the shape of her eyes, and the particular way she held her jaw, and the small scar on her left collarbone visible above the neckline of the oversized shirt. He had known this face since it was a child's face. He could not have confused her for anyone else on earth. His weapon lowered. Slowly. Deliberately. He held her gaze for a long moment. Something moved across his face, complex and private, and gone before it could be named. Then he raised his left hand. One small specific gesture. Outside, the attack withdrew. Not in chaos. Not in defeat. With the same organization it had arrived with. Measured, deliberate. A retreat that had been decided rather than forced. The man looked at Ada one final second. Then he was gone. The door swung shut. The compound fell into a ringing, breathless silence. Park came through the main door first. 2 guards behind him. Then Ji-won. Ada stood up slowly from behind the counter. She was unhurt. Ji-won could see that immediately. He looked at her the way a person looked at something they had been afraid of losing for the 30 longest seconds of their recent life. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were assembling a question from everything she had just witnessed. The attack. The sudden withdrawal. The man in the kitchen who had looked at her like he already knew exactly who she was. Who had lowered his weapon. Who had signaled a retreat with one raised hand and then disappeared like smoke. She looked at Ji-won. "What just happened?" Ji-won held her gaze. He looked at this woman standing in his kitchen in his oversized shirt with her steady eyes and her steady breathing and her father's name sitting in an envelope in his study. And he understood that the time he had bought himself was gone. The answer existed. He was the only one who had it. The question was not whether he would tell her. The question was whether she would be ready for what came with it. Ji-won had intended to tell her. That was the truth of it. He had lain awake after she fell asleep and constructed the conversation in his head. How he would begin it. What he would say first. How much he would give her, and how much he would hold back until she was ready for it. He had planned it carefully, the way he planned everything, methodically, thoroughly, with full consideration of every possible response. He would tell her in the morning. That was what he decided. But the morning came, and Ada was warm and unhurried beside him, and the words stayed exactly where he had put them. Waiting. Jisei, and then the attack happened, and the morning became something else entirely. And by the time the compound was secured, and Ada was standing in the kitchen asking him what had just happened, the conversation he had planned felt simultaneously more necessary and more impossible than it had the night before. He looked at her and said he would explain everything. Soon. Ada looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded and went home. The envelope arrived at her apartment the following morning. No postage, no return address. Slipped under her door sometime in the early hours while she slept. A plain brown envelope, her name written on the front in handwriting she did not recognize. She stood in her hallway in her pajamas and looked at it for a moment before she picked it up. Inside were photographs. 6 of them, printed cleanly. The kind that came from a proper camera and not a phone. She went through them slowly at her kitchen table, coffee going cold beside her. The first photograph, a warehouse, large, industrial. The kind that existed on the edge of cities where nobody asked questions about what happened inside them. The second, 2 men standing outside it. Taken from a distance, slightly grainy, but clear enough. One of them was broad and Nigerian and carried himself with the kind of authority that did not need announcing. Ada's hand tightened on the photograph. Her father. Younger than she last remembered him, but unmistakably him. The set of his shoulders. The particular way he stood with his weight on his left foot. The cigar between his fingers. She set that photograph down very carefully. The third photograph, the same location, the same night judging by the light. But now there was a third figure in the frame, partially turned away from the camera. Lean, Korean, younger than he was now, but Ada knew that jaw, knew the way he held himself. Ji-won. She sat very still. The fourth photograph, the same building from a different angle, and something was wrong with it. It took her a moment to understand what she was looking at. The building was on fire. The fifth photograph, the aftermath. Daylight. The warehouse reduced to blackened structure and debris. Emergency vehicles at the perimeter. The sixth, a newspaper clipping, photographed rather than cut out. The headline in English above a smaller Nigerian publication. 3 words were enough. Fire. No survivors. Ada set the photographs down on the table in a neat row. She sat with them for a long time. Then she found the note at the bottom of the envelope. Folded once. Short. If you want to know the truth about your father and the man you are involved with, meet me tomorrow, 6 p.m. The address below. Come alone. You deserve to know. An address followed. Ada read it twice. Then she folded it back along its crease and held it in both hands and looked at the photographs spread across her kitchen table. Her father's face looked back at her from across the years. She went. Of course she went. The address led her to a small cafe on a quiet street. Unremarkable. The kind of place that did not attract attention and had probably been chosen for exactly that reason. He was already there when she arrived. The man from the kitchen, broad-shouldered, the scar along his jaw. He was sitting with his hands around a cup of tea, and he stood when he saw her come through the door. Not out of politeness entirely, but out of something older than that. Something that looked almost like respect. She sat across from him. They looked at each other. "You knew my father," she said. Not a question. "For 20 years," he said. "My name is Kalade. I was his closest man." Ada held his gaze. "Tell me." Kalad set his cup down. And he told her. He told her about the territory, a stretch of the city that both men had wanted for years, not out of greed, he was careful to say, but because of what it represented. Access, control, safety for their respective operations. Both men had built their claim to it over years, and neither was prepared to walk away. He told her about the negotiations, the years of back and forth, the near agreements that fell apart, the tension that had become, over time, simply the backdrop of both their lives. And then he told her about the night her father made his decision. He called a meeting, Kolade said. He said he was going to let it go. The territory. He was going to give it to Jiawan. He paused. He said Jiwan was younger and still needed to prove himself, and that letting him have it was the mature thing to do. He said he was tired of fighting over ground. Ada listened without moving. They agreed to meet at the warehouse to make it official. Neutral ground, just the two of them and their closest men. Kolade's jaw tightened. We got there. The meeting started. And then, 20 minutes in, they came. Who came? Armed men, from every entrance at once, professional, coordinated. He looked at her. Saw, the building went up in less than 5 minutes. Whatever they used, it was not improvised. Someone had planned it. Someone who knew exactly where we would be and exactly when we would be there. The cafe was quiet around them. My father, Ada said carefully. We lost him in the fire, Khalad said. We lost 4 others. I got out through a roof access that they had not accounted for. I spent 2 months recovering. He touched the scar along his jaw briefly. And then I started looking for answers. Ada looked at the table. For years, we assumed everyone inside died. It was chaos. The building was gone. He stopped. And then 3 years later, Jiawan Shu resurfaced. Alive. Running a larger operation than he had before. Expanded territory. He let that sit between them. The territory your father had been about to hand him freely. Ada looked up. You think he planned it? I think, Kolade said carefully, that your father trusted him, And I think that trust was used against him. The silence that followed was long and had many things in it. Ada looked at the photographs he had laid on the table between them. She looked at her father's face. She looked at the burning warehouse. She looked at Ji-won's younger face turned partially away from the camera, and she thought about scars. She thought about the scars on his back, the way they were layered and deep in the particular way that fire left its record on skin. She thought about the cigar, rare, specific, imported through channels that did not appear on any legal document, the kind only people in the closest circles had access to. Her father's favorite cigar. She thought about the way Ji-won had looked at her from the top of the stairs the first time she mentioned it, the way he had asked, carefully, measured, the question beneath the question, "Who is your father?" She sat very still and felt the pieces find each other without her permission. Kolade reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table. "There is enough in there to take you somewhere safe, far from this city, far from him." He held her gaze. "He is a dangerous man, Ada. Whatever you thought was happening between you, you need to understand what you are dealing with." Ada looked at the envelope, then at the photographs. Then she stood up. She did not take the envelope. She did not say anything. She walked out of the cafe and into the evening air and stood on the pavement for a moment with the sounds of the city around her. Ordinary, indifferent, completely unaware of what had just rearranged itself inside her chest. Then she walked to the bus stop, and she went home. She locked the door behind her, stood in the hallway of her apartment with her back against the door, and the silence of the flat pressing in from every direction. She looked at nothing for a long moment, and then she screamed. Not words, not his name, not any of the questions or accusations or grief that were all tangled together inside her and pressing upward at once. Just the sound of it, raw and private, and completely hers. She slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor with her knees drawn up and her hands over her face, and everything she had not allowed herself to feel in the cafe sitting on her chest like a physical weight. Her father, Ji-won, the scars on his back, the cigar, the way he had held her hand under the covers and said nothing, the way he had looked at her like she was the first true thing he had encountered in years. She sat on the floor of her hallway for a very long time, and outside the locked door, the city went on without her. Ada did not sleep that night. She lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling, and did not sleep. At some point in the early hours, she got up and pulled her suitcase from the top of the wardrobe and began filling it with the quiet efficiency of someone who had made a decision and was not going to unmake it. She worked through the dark, folding, packing, moving through her apartment with purpose. She had kept her phone face down on the kitchen counter all night. It had not stopped. His name appearing over and over on the screen. Calls, messages, calls again. Each one ignored. Each one adding its weight to the thing sitting in her chest that she was not yet ready to look at directly. She was done. That was what she told herself as she zipped the suitcase. She was done, and she was leaving, and she was never going to forgive herself for falling in love with her father's killer. That was the sentence she had built in the night, and she was keeping it. She booked the Uber, dragged the suitcase to the door, took one last look at her apartment. Then she opened the door and stopped. Ji-won was standing at the entrance to her building. He looked like a man who had not slept. Not in the polished, dangerous way he usually carried himself, but in the raw, undone way of someone the night had taken apart piece by piece. His jacket was creased. His eyes were heavy. He looked, for the first time since she had known him, like someone who did not know what to do with his hands. "Please," he said, "let me explain." Ada looked at him. Then she looked past him. She began pulling her suitcase down the path. "Ada!" She kept walking. "Ada, please. It is not what you think." She did not slow down, did not turn. Wei did not give him a single thing to hold on to. She had decided this in the night, and she was holding the decision with both hands. She spotted the Uber at the curb, walked straight to it, opened the boot, began loading her bag. Ada, for goodness sake, listen to me. Please. It is not what you think. His voice was behind her, close, the most unguarded she had ever heard it. Something in it that she had never heard from him before. Not authority, not quietness, not the measured control of a man who chose every word. Desperation. She felt it land somewhere in her chest. She closed the boot, walked around to the passenger door, opened it. Ada! She got in, closed the door, looked straight ahead. Please go, she said to the driver. The car pulled away. She did not look back. She would not let herself look back. Jiwan stood on the pavement and watched the car until it disappeared around the corner, and the street was empty and there was nothing left to watch. He stood there for a long moment. Park emerged from the car behind him, stood nearby, said nothing. For once in his life, did not reach for his notepad, simply stood. Jia Wan sat down on the low wall at the entrance to her building. Just sat. He had held many things in his life: power, territory, loyalty built over years, and maintained through will and discipline, and the particular kind of strength that did not bend. He had lost things too, more than most people knew, more than he had ever spoken about. But this was different. Love was rare. He had always known that in the abstract way you knew things you had not yet experienced. So now he understood it in the specific way. The way that arrived in the body, in the chest, in the particular hollowness of a pavement, on an ordinary street, on an ordinary morning, when a car turned a corner and kept going. He had found something real, for the first time in more years than he wanted to count. Something that had arrived wearing mismatched earrings and a broken hem, and had walked into his house, and his wound, and his silence, and made itself at home without asking permission. And he had lost it, not to circumstance, not to time. To the truth he had waited too long to tell. Park cleared his throat gently. Sir, the car. Ji-won looked at the empty street one more time. Then he stood, and they drove home. The city moved past the window. Ada sat in the back of the Uber, with her hands in her lap and her eyes forward, and the decision still in both her hands where she had put it. 4 minutes from the station, she reached into her bag for her lip gloss. Her fingers moved through the contents: phone, purse, keys, a pen she did not remember putting in there, a folded receipt, and then her fingers closed around something else, a small tube. She did not need to look at it to know what it was. She pulled it out anyway, the keloid cream. She held it in her palm and looked at it. She had spent the better part of an afternoon 2 weeks ago on the phone tracking this down. 3 pharmacies had not stocked it. She had called a specialist supplier, had it ordered in, had paid more than she wanted to for the shipping because she wanted it to arrive quickly. Stow had thought about his back the entire time she was doing it. The scars, the tension in the skin, the way they pulled when he moved, and had felt something warm and purposeful in the doing of it. She sat with the tube in her hand. 3 minutes from the station. She thought about his back. She thought about the scars. She thought about what Colade had told her, and what the photographs had shown her, and the screen she had let out on her hallway floor. And then she thought about something else. She thought about the oath, the one she had taken the day she became a nurse. Not a romantic oath, not a convenient one, a real one. The kind that did not have an exception clause for heartbreak or betrayal or the complicated grief of learning that someone you loved had a past that predated you and was darker than you had known. First, do no harm. She looked at the tube. 2 minutes from the station. She closed her fingers around it. Please turn back, she said quietly. The driver glanced in the mirror. Sorry? Turn back. I need to drop something. She gave him the address. I won't be long. The driver nodded, indicated, turned. The gates of the compound opened before she reached them. She did not know if they had been watching or if they had simply recognized the car. It did not matter. She walked through and across the grounds and into the building and up the stairs and down the corridor, and she knocked on his bedroom door. No answer. She knocked again. The door opened. Ji-won stood in the doorway. He looked at her, the way a man looked at something he had believed was gone. Like he was not entirely sure she was real, and was not ready to find out she wasn't. Ada held out the cream. "Your scar tissue will tighten without this," she said. "Apply it twice a day, morning and evening. The instructions are on the back." Ji-won looked at the tube in her outstretched hand. He did not take it immediately. "Ada." "Take it," she said. Her voice was steady. It cost her something to keep it that way, but she managed it. He took it. They stood in the doorway looking at each other. And then Ada, who had kept the decision in both hands all morning, felt it shift. Not dissolve, not disappear, just shift into something more complicated and more honest than a decision made in the dark at 3 in the morning. "Tell me," she said, "all of it, right now. And do not leave anything out." Ji-won stepped back from the door. She walked in. He told her everything, not the version edited for her comfort, not the version that protected him. Everything, the territory, her father, the years of conflict, the meeting at the warehouse. He told her what he had known going in and what he had not known. He told her about the attack, who had ordered it, and it was not him. He told her about the months of recovery that nobody knew about, the years of living with what had happened in that building, the guilt that had no clean place to sit. He told her that Emeka Okonkwo had been the most honorable man he had ever faced across a table, and that losing him the way they lost him was something Ji-won had carried every day since. He told her that when Park gave him the envelope with her name in it, he had stood in his hallway for a very long time. He told her that he had wanted to tell her, that he had planned to tell her, that he had been afraid. Ada sat and listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, the room was quiet. She looked at her hands. "Who ordered the attack?" she asked. "A third party," he said. "Someone who wanted both operations gone, who used the meeting as an opportunity." He paused. "I spent 3 years finding out who, and then I dealt with it." Ada was quiet for a long time. "My father was going to give you the territory," she said. "Yes." "Because he respected you." "Yes." She looked at him. "And you have been carrying his name all this time." Ji-won held her gaze. "Every day," he said. The silence between them was long and complicated, and full of things that did not have words yet. Ada sat with all of it. The grief for her father, which was not new, but had a new shape now. The anger which was still there, but had shifted its direction. The hurt of the past weeks sitting alongside everything else. She looked at the man across from her, wounded in ways that went far deeper than the arm she had dressed in this room weeks ago. Carrying things she was only now beginning to understand. Who had looked at her from the first day like she was something he had not expected and could not explain. She thought about the ring his grandmother had worn. She did not know about the ring yet, but Ji-won was already thinking about it. He had thought about it the night she left. Niu had sat in this room in the dark and looked at the small box in the drawer of the bedside table. The one he had carried from his grandmother's house years ago. The one he had never opened in front of anyone. The one he had told himself he would know when the time came. He had known. He had known from the day a nurse with mismatched earrings walked into his room and called his guards dummies and told him his scars were beautiful. He stood, crossed to the bedside table, opened the drawer. Ada watched him. He took out a small box. Old. The kind that had been handled many times over many years. He turned to face her. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "She made me promise to give it to the woman who captured my heart." He looked at her. "She said I would know her when she arrived." He opened the box. The ring inside was simple and extraordinary, the kind of thing that did not need to announce itself. Worn smooth with years and kept with care, and full of the particular significance of something that had been waiting for the right moment for a very long time. Ada looked at it, then at him. "Ji-won," I am not asking you to forget, he said. I am not asking you to pretend that none of this happened, or that it is simple. It is not simple. He held her gaze. I am asking you to let me spend whatever time you give me, making sure you never regret walking back through that door. Ada looked at the ring. She thought about her father, who had been a man of honor in a world that did not always reward honor, who had made a decision rooted in maturity and had paid for it with his life through no fault of the man standing in front of her. She thought about the cream in Jiwan's hand, the thing that had turned the car around, the oath she had taken, and the woman she was underneath all of it. She looked up. You have to tell me everything, she said. Going forward, no more envelopes, no more distance, no more not yet. Yes, he said, and we find out what really happened to my father. Together. Yes, he said again, without hesitation. Ada looked at the ring one more time. Then she held out her hand. Ji-won slid the ring onto her finger. It fit as though it had been made for her. He held her hand in both of his and looked at her, and the man who had not known what to do with his hands on a pavement that morning looked now, like a man who had found where to put them. Ada looked at the ring on her finger. Then she looked at him. You still owe me an explanation for ignoring my calls, she said. The corner of his mouth moved. I know, he said. I'm not finished being angry about that. I know, he said again. She held his gaze. And then, slowly, tiredly, honestly, with the full weight of everything the past weeks had held, she smiled. Not a large smile, but a real one. The kind that cost something and meant everything. Outside the compound, the city went on as it always did, indifferent, continuous, unaware of what had just been decided in a room on an upper floor between two people who had found each other by the most unlikely and complicated route imaginable. A nurse with a broken bag wheel, a man with his grandmother's ring, and somewhere between the mismatched earrings and the loose hem, and the scars, and the cigar, and the cream, and the door that had opened and opened again. Something true,